In a quiet cemetery, a little girl leaned over her father's coffin for one last hug. As she whispered her goodbye, something so shocking happened that it made the entire crowd scream in disbelief. What did this grieving child do, and what unfolded that left everyone stunned? Stay tuned, this story will take a turn you won't see coming. The sun had barely risen over the bustling city of Accra, Ghana, when Igbo Mensa arrived at the construction site. His hands were calloused, his back sore, but his determination was unbreakable. Born into poverty, Igbo had spent his life trying to break free from the chains that had held his family down for generations. His parents, too, had harbored dreams of a better life, but fate had been cruel to them. They passed away while Igbo was still a young boy, leaving him to fend for himself. Igbo worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, construction by day and factory shifts by night. But the job that brought him the most joy was selling wache, the fragrant rice and beans dish he cooked on a small street corner. It was during one of these busy days, with the sun blazing down, that he first saw her, Lena Agyeman. Her deep brown eyes sparkled as she smiled, and Igbo couldn't help but notice her graceful presence among the crowd. Lena began appearing at the same time every day, her footsteps light as she approached Igbo's modest food stall. Igbo would always keep a portion of wache aside for her, anticipating her arrival. They spoke little at first, exchanging smiles and polite greetings. But as the days turned into weeks, their conversations grew deeper. Lena was kind and full of laughter, a light in Igbo's hard life. One day, as storm clouds gathered overhead, Igbo noticed Lena walking toward his stall. He had just finished selling his last portion for the day. The skies opened up in a torrential downpour, and Igbo scrambled to pack up his stall before the rain ruined his cooking equipment. To his surprise, Lena rushed over to help him. They laughed as they struggled to secure everything, drenched and breathless. Finding shelter under an old bus stop, Igbo finally confessed his feelings. "Lena," he said, his voice trembling, "I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I can't stop thinking about you." Lena's eyes widened, and then, with a soft smile, she said, "What took you so long to say it? I've been waiting." Igbo couldn't believe how much his life had changed since Lena walked into it. What had started as shy conversations over servings of wache had turned into a bond deeper than he ever imagined. Every morning, before the sun had a chance to bathe Accra in its golden light, Igbo would wake up to find Lena already bustling around their small kitchen, kneading dough and preparing spices. The aroma of freshly cooked wache would fill their modest home, a scent that carried a promise of better days. Lena had a natural flair for business. She suggested new recipes, experimented with different flavors, and most importantly, charmed customers with her friendly smile and engaging conversations. Soon, customers didn't just come for Igbo's delicious wache, they came to see Lena's radiant smile and enjoy the warmth she brought to the tiny street corner where they sold their food. Word spread throughout the bustling neighborhoods of Accra. If you wanted the best wache in the city, you needed to visit Igbo and Lena's stall. With the influx of new customers, Igbo's profits began to soar. Lena encouraged him to save part of their earnings. "We could open our own shop," she would say, her eyes sparkling with hope. At first, Igbo laughed it off, but as their savings grew, so did their dreams. One particularly busy afternoon, when they had just finished serving a long queue of hungry office workers, Igbo's phone rang. It was an unknown number. At first, he hesitated to answer, but Lena nudged him playfully. "What if it's someone important?" she teased. On the other end was Mr. Badu, a representative from a large telecommunications company in Accra. "I've heard about your famous wache," he said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "We're hosting a conference next week and would love for you to cater the event." Igbo was speechless. It felt like a dream, a chance to cater for a major corporation. But it was Lena, ever the optimist, who accepted the challenge without hesitation. "We can do this, Igbo," she said, squeezing his hand. "This is our chance." The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. Igbo and Lena worked day and night, buying ingredients in bulk, testing recipes, and practicing their presentation. When the day of the conference arrived, the couple was exhausted but determined. The moment the attendees tasted Ibo's wache, the room filled with delighted murmurs and satisfied smiles. The catering was a resounding success. The event opened doors they had never imagined. Orders began pouring in from companies and individuals alike. Soon, Ibo's small street cart transformed into a cozy shop located in one of the bustling markets of Accra. They painted it a cheerful shade of yellow, symbolizing the bright future they envisioned. The shop had a small sign that read, "Ibo and Lena's Kitchen, home of the best wache in town." With the business thriving, Ibo and Lena found time to focus on their relationship. They would walk hand in hand along the beach after a long day, the sound of waves crashing softly in the background. On Sundays, they would take a break from work to explore the vibrant streets of Accra, treating themselves to fried plantains and chilled coconut water. Within a year of their first meeting, they decided to take their relationship to the next level. Ibo proposed on one of their evening walks by the beach under a sky full of stars. Lena's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." 4 months later, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony attended by their closest friends and family. Lena wore a simple but elegant white dress, and Ibo couldn't stop smiling as he watched her walk down the aisle. "You're my miracle," he whispered as they exchanged vows. Life was perfect. They had a thriving business, a cozy home, and most importantly, they had each other. But behind their laughter and shared dreams, there was a quiet longing, one that neither of them voiced but both felt deeply. As the months turned into years, Ibo and Lena dreamed of filling their home with the laughter of children. They tried everything: visits to doctors, herbal remedies, and countless prayers. Every time Lena saw children playing on the street, her heart ached. She would smile and wave, but inside, she felt a pang of sadness. Ibo, ever the optimist, would hold her close at night and say, "It will happen." He tried to hide his own disappointment, but Lena could see it in his eyes. The laughter they once shared in their cozy kitchen was slowly replaced by quiet conversations, both of them tiptoeing around the topic that weighed heavily on their hearts. One evening, as they sat on their shop's front porch after closing for the day, Lena finally broke down. "What if it never happens for us, Ibo?" she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Ibo pulled her into his arms, gently wiping away her tears. "No matter what, we have each other, and that's more than enough." Yet even as he said those words, they both held on to hope that one day they would hear the pitter-patter of tiny feet in their home. Little did they know that fate had something extraordinary in store for them, a miracle that would change their lives forever. 2 years after their wedding, when they had almost given up hope, Lena discovered she was pregnant. Ibo cried tears of joy as he held her hand in the small clinic where they received the news. 9 months later, they welcomed a beautiful baby girl into the world, Nia. She had Lena's gentle eyes and Ibo's strong brows. Nia was no ordinary child. By the age of 3, she was reading books and solving simple math problems. Ibo and Lena nurtured her curiosity, amazed at her hunger for knowledge. They were a close-knit family, spending evenings playing games and sharing stories under the starry skies of Accra. But happiness, as they would soon learn, can be heartbreakingly fleeting. Nia's 5th birthday had been a day filled with joy. The cozy living room of their home was decorated with colorful balloons, and the scent of Lena's famous jollof rice wafted through the air. Ibo, Lena, and Nia were huddled around their coffee table, playing Nia's favorite board game. The room was filled with laughter as Ibo playfully let Nia win, the little girl squealing in delight. But in an instant, everything changed. As Ibo leaned back to share another laugh with his wife and daughter, his smile froze. His eyes widened, rolling back as his body went limp. The sound of a thud as he collapsed echoed through the room, freezing Lena in terror. "Ibo!" she screamed, rushing to his side. Nia, confused and frightened, watched as her mother desperately tried to shake him awake. The seconds felt like hours until Ibo's eyes fluttered open. Gasping for breath, he tried to brush off the incident. "I'm fine," he insisted weakly, wiping Lena's tears with trembling hands. But the fear in her eyes remained, and she knew deep down that this wasn't something they could ignore. The days that followed were filled with a tension that neither Ibo nor Lena spoke about. Lena kept a close eye on him, watching for any signs of weakness. But a week later, while Ibo was cooking breakfast, it happened again. This time, it was worse. He collapsed, hitting the floor hard. The clang of the frying pan hitting the ground sent Lena running in from the next room. This time, there were no reassurances, no brushing it off as exhaustion. "We're going to the hospital," Lena insisted, her voice shaking. Ibo, seeing the fear in her eyes, reluctantly agreed. The hospital smelled sterile and cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth of their home. Lena clutched Ibo's hand tightly as they sat in the waiting room, their fingers intertwined in silent fear. Hours later, after a battery of tests, the doctor called them into his office. "I'm afraid it's serious," the doctor said, his expression somber. "Ibo, you have a rare condition, and it's terminal." The room seemed to spin as Lena's world shattered. She could barely hear the rest of the conversation. Words like "months to live" and "palliative care" floated around her, but all she could think of was Nia. How would they tell their little girl that her father was dying? Ibo and Lena decided to keep the diagnosis a secret from Nia. "Papa is just tired," Lena would tell her whenever she asked why he looked so pale or needed to rest so often. But Nia was far too perceptive for her age. She could sense the change in the air, the tension that now hung over their once lively home. One afternoon, during a hospital visit, Nia climbed onto her father's bed and took his frail hand in her tiny one. "Papa," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "Are you going to leave us?" Ibo's heart broke as he looked into her wide, innocent eyes. For a moment, he considered lying, protecting her from the harsh truth. But in that moment, he realized that Nia was strong, perhaps stronger than he had ever given her credit for. Tears welled in his eyes as he nodded slowly. "Yes, my darling," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Papa is sick, and one day I will have to leave. But remember this," he continued, placing her small hand over his heart. "I will always be with you, right here in your heart." Nia nodded solemnly, her bottom lip trembling, but she didn't cry. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "I'll keep you in my heart forever, Papa," she promised. In the days that followed, Nia displayed a strength that astounded both Ibo and Lena. Though she was only 5, she seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. She would sit quietly by Ibo's side, holding his hand, reading her little storybooks to him, or simply resting her head on his shoulder. Lena, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of emotions. One moment, she would be strong, holding Ibo's hand with a reassuring smile, and the next, she would break down in tears when she thought no one was looking. Nia never saw her mother cry. Lena had become adept at hiding her pain, determined to protect her daughter from the sorrow that consumed her. But in those quiet moments, when it was just Ibo and Nia, there was peace. The ticking clock on the wall reminded Ibo of the time slipping away, but every second with his daughter felt like a gift. And for Nia, each day with her father became a precious memory she would carry in her heart forever. Ibo's health deteriorated rapidly. Nia became his little guardian angel, spending hours by his bedside, refusing to cry in front of him. On the night before his passing, Nia stayed with her father alone. They held hands, and in their hearts they said their goodbyes. The next morning, Ibo passed away peacefully in his sleep. Lena was inconsolable, filled with regrets for not spending more time with him in his final moments. At the funeral, while everyone sobbed, Nia stood quietly, her face a mask of calm. As the coffin was about to be lowered into the ground, Nia turned to her mother and asked, "Can I hug Papa one last time?" Lena, though hesitant, nodded. Nia climbed onto the small wooden step that had been placed by the coffin, wrapping her small arms around her father. She had written a letter to her father, filled with words her young heart could barely understand. Nia had insisted on giving it to him herself, her final gift. As the pastor said the closing words, signaling that it was time to lower Ibo into the ground, Nia tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, please," she whispered. "Let me say goodbye." Lena hesitated, unsure if she could bear it, but seeing the determination in her daughter's eyes, she nodded. "Go ahead, my love," she said softly, her voice breaking. The mourners watched in silence as Nia climbed onto the small wooden step that had been placed by the coffin. She leaned over and hugged her father, her small arms wrapping around his still body. "I love you, Papa," she whispered, her breath warm against his cold cheek. "I will keep you in my heart forever." She placed the letter inside the coffin and kissed him one last time on the forehead. As she pulled away, tears streamed down her cheeks, but her expression remained calm. Nia turned to step back, but just as she did, a sudden rush of wind swept through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. In that moment, a flutter of wings filled the air. The mourners gasped, some stepping back in shock, as a pure white dove descended from the sky, its feathers glowing softly against the gray clouds. The bird glided gracefully, circling above the crowd before landing gently on Ibo's chest. The cemetery fell into a stunned silence. It was as if time itself had paused. The dove tilted its head, its dark eyes fixed on Nia. It took a few delicate steps forward and pecked her cheek softly, almost like a kiss. For a moment, the sorrow in the air seemed to lift, replaced by something unspoken, a sense of peace, of love. Lena watched in disbelief, her tears momentarily forgotten. The adults around them murmured in hushed tones, some making the sign of the cross, others wiping their eyes. To many, the appearance of the dove felt like a miracle, an impossible sign from beyond. But Nia, with the innocence and wisdom of a child, simply smiled. "Papa sent him," she said softly, looking up at the sky. "He wants us to know he's happy and at peace." Lena's heart clenched, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. But this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. As she watched her daughter's serene face, a flicker of hope ignited in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, Ibo truly was watching over them. The years passed, and life carried Nia and Lena forward. Though the memory of Ibo never faded, Nia grew up to be a strong, wise woman, her father's resilience and kindness living on in her. She pursued her dreams, built a life, and eventually had children of her own. On quiet evenings, Nia would gather her children and grandchildren in her cozy living room. The sound of their laughter would fill the air, just as it had in her childhood home so many years ago. And every so often they would ask her to tell them the story of their great-grandfather and the miraculous dove. Sitting by the flickering firelight, Nia would smile softly, her eyes distant with memory. "Your great-grandfather was the most loving man," she would begin. "When I was your age, he became very sick, but he never stopped loving us. Even after he left this world, he found a way to tell me he would always be with us." The children would listen, eyes wide with wonder, as she described the moment when the dove appeared at his funeral. "That dove was Papa's way of telling me that love never dies," Nia would say, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when someone we love is no longer here, they remain with us in our hearts." As she finished the story, one of her grandchildren would inevitably ask, "Do you really think the dove was sent by him, Grandma?" Nia would smile, looking at the eager faces of her grandchildren. "Yes," she would whisper, "because love is the strongest magic of all." And in those moments, a white dove would often appear, perched quietly on the windowsill outside, as if listening to the story. Nia would smile knowingly, a silent message shared between the past and the present, proof that some bonds are too powerful to break. As she finished telling her grandchildren the story, they asked, "Do you think it was really him, Grandma?" Nia smiled, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she whispered. "Love like that never dies. It simply finds new ways to show itself." As they hugged her, a dove perched on the window outside, cooing softly, as if to say, "I'm still here." And so, Nia carried the memory of that miraculous moment for the rest of her life, believing the dove was her father's final message of love. But what do you think really happened that day? Was it a sign from beyond or just a coincidence? If you were in Nia's place, would you believe it was a message from her father? How would it change how you see the world? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe in signs, or is it simply a child's imagination at play? Thank you for listening, and until next time, hold your loved ones close.